First, let's just cover some of the news. Of course, Trump's order to temporarily ban refugees and to ban people coming in from 7 countries that the Obama administration deemed as dangerous so they can check on their vetting procedures. That has been suspended by a Seattle judge, James Robart, because he said, kind of ridiculously, he said that it was bound to be overturned, so I'm suspending it, which is, he's actually allowed to do that, like if he thinks there's a likely case that it will be suspended. But why he thinks that, nobody knows, and whether a Seattle judge actually has the right to do that, I'm not sure. Donald Trump, of course, responded with a tweet calling him a so-called judge, and the hearts of the media broke in twain for the feelings of this judge. You got to watch this. This is incredible. George Snuffleupagus, former Democrat hack, currently a Democrat hack portraying a journalist on TV, says to Mike Pence, like, aren't you concerned? Listen to the lovelorn voice of this guy.
Is it right for the president to say so-called judge? Doesn't that undermine the separation of powers in the Constitution written right next door?
Well, I don't think it does. I think the American people are very accustomed to this president speaking his mind and speaking very straight with them. And it's very frustrating when scholars on the left and the right, people as distinguished as Jonathan Turley of George Washington University, have said, while he doesn't agree with the executive order, he recognizes the president has the full authority to put the security of the homeland first in determining who comes into this country. But to see a judge actually suspend that order across the country, George, is frustrating all of us.
This is a judge who was nominated by President Bush, 99-0, confirmed. How is he a so-called judge?
Well, again, there's simply no question under the Constitution and frankly under federal law that the President of the United States has the authority in the interest of national security to determine who has the right to come into this country.
I'm reading really like Mike Pence and Sean Spencer have the hardest jobs in the country right now. It's like they're the Trump whisperers, the guys who tell you what Trump really meant when he said something. But I love the bleeding sadness of George Snuffleupagus as he says, isn't it, what about the separation of powers? I mean, it does my heart good to see left-wing hacks suddenly worried about the separation of powers. Where were they for 8 years? They didn't, but it's great. I mean, it's terrific. We should have had Trump in there a long time ago. Here's Andrew Napolitano, the legal authority at Fox News, good guy, talking about just the fact that Trump does absolutely have the right to do what he did.
Whether you think this is wise or not, whether you think it's disruptive or not, whether you think it's fair to stop everybody, including people with hardship cases, in order to keep a few bad people out, that is a decision for the President of the United States and the President of the United States only. The statute,
his job.
Correct. The statute couldn't be clearer. It's a 1952 statute that expressly says the President of the United States on his own may suspend the immigration of any person, class, or group of people for public health, public safety, or national security. End of the story.
Clear.
So I just want to remind people, the thing is, we have to find our way here because it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, the level of hysteria. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute, the level of hysteria with which Trump is being covered, that there is this tendency to say, well, you never did this with Obama. You never did this with Obama, without judging Trump on what he says on its own merits. I mean, just to remind you, here is Obama at the State of the Union hurling what is an absolute untruth into the faces of the Supreme Court. They had just done this, the case that, oh my gosh, I forgot the one that Hillary Clinton was always yelling about, where they said that a corporation retains its rights to free speech. And this drove the left crazy, and they've been trying to destroy it ever since. And he hurls it back. They're sitting there, and he hurls it back in their face. Now listen to this.
With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections.
So you can see Alito sitting there shaking his head going, what the hell is he talking about? I just reversed any law. I mean, they basically just said, as I've explained this to left-wingers again and again, all they said was that if you form a corporation, you don't lose your rights to free speech. So, that clear attempt to intimidate the Supreme Court from the bully pulpit of the presidency went virtually without notice in the mainstream media. You didn't see Snuffleupagus crying then. I mean, that's only now that the guy is suddenly, oh my goodness, he called him a so-called judge, you know.